here, Finn. Come here. There you go, boy.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. We're ready to begin. We are live. Thank you. I hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend. As in the past, I'm going to put everyone on mute, and then we'll unmute a few times for questions along the way. Okay, so one of my favorite stories for this time of the year is about the rabbi who goes into the Hebrew school class, and he's trying to engage the children in a conversation. He wants to make it fun and interactive. So he's holding a shofar behind his back, and he says to the children, he says, "Tell me, what is it that we see in the synagogue only one time of the year?" He's holding a shofar in the back, behind his back, and he's waiting for the children to guess. And one little girl raises her hand. She says, "I know, that's my dad you're talking about." So it is a time of the year when we think about the high holidays. It is a time in the Jewish year for renewal, a time for reflection, introspection. We think about the year past, and we think about our who we are as people, our growth, and our journey in life, and assess where we are, what we can do to improve. And so, of course, all of these Kabbalistic teachings that talk about our personal growth and what we have to do in life is very apropos and very applicable at this time. One of the great challenges that the Kabbalah speaks about when we discuss spiritual life is the concept that inspiration is very hard to come by. It's very hard to induce and to create inspiration. If you wake up and you're uninspired, sometimes it's very hard to get that inspiration. And even when we do get inspired, inspiration, excuse me, is very fleeting. And so we can be inspired, and then a few moments later or a day later, we just kind of lose the inspiration. So it's a kind of a very elusive and very difficult when we're dealing with inspiration. And therefore, we find that a lot of our deeds that we do good deeds, may be uninspired. And we want to talk a little bit more about the value or the importance of uninspired deeds. In Kabbalah, it talks about the fact that the Kabbalah provides us with a spiritual MRI of the person. So if we want to understand, when you take an MRI, you get to see what's going on inside a person's physical body. Kabbalah provides the spiritual MRI. It gives us an understanding of the inner workings of the human being, and how we are structured spiritually. And of course, as many of us are aware, we talk about in the Kabbalah a lot. It talks about the two-soul doctrine, that the human being is truly a two-souled being. It's not a person is not a one-souled being that has different inclinations and has different wants and desires. Rather, that we have two distinct different souls. That's the way God created the human being. In fact, we find this distinction, and this is what distinguishes human beings from the other parts of the animal world, is that in the creation of man, we find two parts. The creation of man's body, of the human being's body. It says God took the earth and formed it and created the body. And then it says there was another step in the process of creation in which God blows a soul into this body. So there's a two-step process here. And the reason for these two steps in the creation of man, which you do not find in the creation of any other of the creatures, is because man is a two-souled being. The human being has two different parts to themselves. There's the biological body part of themselves. There's the fact that we are physical beings, animated physical beings, like all the other animals in this world, that have instincts, desires, a sense of self-awareness, and we have the ability to think, to feel. These are things that we share with all creatures. Maybe we are in some ways more sophisticated about some of these things, but we share that. Many animals have the ability to think, to feel. They have instincts, they have desires, they're aware of themselves. There's an instinct and a desire for survival and for preservation and so on and so forth. And the human being has that biological animal, so to speak, self, but we also have this other soul, another side of us that is altruistic, that is truth-seeking. There is a part of the human being, even though we can go a long time without necessarily tapping into this or feeling it or being aware of it, but the human being also asks, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the meaning of all of this? What's the meaning of life? What is my reason for being beyond just my existence, just surviving? What is my purpose? And we can reflect and think and desire something beyond just my existence, that we want to have, our life should have meaning. It should be about something beyond ourselves. And there, with that comes the ability for sacrifice and so on and so forth. And so there is another distinct, different soul, a different part of ourselves. But what's interesting is when the Kabbalah talks about this spiritual MRI, and it discusses these two souls, it explains that these two souls may be two souls, but they're vying for control of the same human being. In other words, if you want to imagine or use the parable of two people that both want to drive the car, right? They're in the same car and they both want to drive the car, but only one person can actually drive the car at a time, right? The other person may be a backseat driver. Some of you may be familiar with that concept, where you're driving and there's someone else who's giving you comments. So you should have done this, you should have done that, and why are you turning this way, and why won't you just listen to the navigation system? You know, why do you always think you know better than the navigation system? Whatever the comments are, I'm sure you've all had your own experiences or whatever those may be. But bottom line is, you can have a backseat driver, but only one person is actually driving the car and directing where the car is going at a time. And the same thing is with these two souls. They're both trying to drive the body. When we say drive the body, that means conscious thought, speech, and action can only be controlled by one of these souls at a time. In other words, when you have a thought, it either can be a self-oriented thought. It could either be about your own enhancement. The focus is myself, my preservation, my pleasure, my enhancement, what is good for me. Or it can be altruistic. It can be about what is right, what is truth, what is thinking about purpose and truth, and what is the reason I am here, and so on and so forth. That's a different type of deed, speech, or action. So the driving force behind this thought, speech, and action, the driver of that thought, speech, and action can either be the animal self-oriented soul or the more altruistic transcendent soul. That is what the Kabbalah explains. The other soul may be in the back seat saying, no, you should have done that. Why are you doing that? And that's silly. You're going to regret that, whatever it may be. But as far as who's driving the car, only one can drive the car at a time. But when the Kabbalah describes this spiritual MRI about these two souls, one of the peculiar details that we come across is that it's not what we would imagine, that these two souls are side by side and both trying to control the drivers, both trying to sit in the driver's seat, but rather one soul resides within the other soul. So they're not side by side, they're one within the other. What do we mean by that? So the Kabbalah says the godly soul resides within the animal soul, and the animal soul within the body. So the godly soul is not just sitting there and the animal soul side by side battling. And of course, the life is the tale of these two souls, of the interaction, the tension, and the ups and downs of the relationship between these two souls, or lack of relationship between these two souls. But rather, they're not just side by side. The godly soul resides within the animal soul. That is the structure. When Kabbalah provides us with the spiritual MRI, and you're looking at the picture that Kabbalah provides, it says that the godly soul lives, so to speak, resides within the animal soul. They are two souls, but one within the other. It's almost like, you know, those Russian little things where you open up and there's one little thing inside of another little thing, right? That's the way that the godly soul is sitting there, and it's sitting there within the animal soul. I'm just going to unmute just to see if anyone has anything they want to clarify at this point before we go on.
This is Alan. Quick
yes,
question.
Go ahead.
So if the godly soul is within the animal soul, it has the opportunity to innately influence the animal soul. Why doesn't it do a better job?
Okay, well, let's you're good point. You're getting a little ahead of where I want to go with this, on the right track, but we're going to address both of those questions in the next few moments. Any other clarifications needed? Okay. So when the Kabbalah explains what is the purpose of this structure of the godly soul within the animal soul, the obvious reason, which is what Alan just alluded to, is that when you reside within it, you have the ability to change it. In other words, the goal is not just to battle. The godly soul says, I want to drive the car. The animal soul says, I want to drive the car. And life becomes about trying to give the godly soul more turns at the driver's seat. That's one goal. We want to give the godly soul more of a dominant role in driving this car. So more of our speech, more of our action, more of our conscious thoughts should be transcendent, godly, altruistic, good, and so on and so forth, and less about self. We want to do that, but there's another thing as well. Not only the battle between the two, we would like to see the godly soul transform the animal soul. And to transform it, it has to almost go inside. It's inside of it. It resides within it. And by residing within it, it is able to have that relationship with it where it can actually transform it, change it, and turn it into rather than an enemy that it's fighting against the whole time, but rather into an ally that works with it. So it's not just a battle, but also between these two entities, but the goal is a transformation. So Alan's second question then, which is our next point, is that, well, if that's the case, why doesn't it do a better job? Because most of us seem to sense that we might be working for a long time spiritually, and yet our animal soul still remains pretty animalistic and pretty self-oriented and materialistic and so on and so forth. And the battle doesn't seem to end. It's an ongoing battle. And the answer to that is that concept of a transformation is a very, very difficult thing to achieve. And according to Kabbalah, it's only achieved by a select few individuals that we refer to as the saints, that are given a gift that they are able to make this transformation. They're able to transform their animal soul through a process of education and refinement and spiritual inner work, where they can take their animal soul, transform it to become an ally, where the animal soul says, I also want to live altruistically for a higher purpose, for godliness. And then once that transformation takes place, there's no longer a battle anymore. There's no battle. There's no inner battle. That's why the existence of the righteous saint is a very peaceful, wholesome existence, because there's no tension now. We don't have two entities that are trying to both fight for the driver's seat, because either one is really driving the car in the same way, and the animal soul is more than happy to allow the godly soul to play that dominant role in the saint. But in most of us, that is not in our cards. It's not in our destiny. It's not the way we were wired. We were created. We're not given that gift, and therefore we cannot make that transformation. And so as we go through life, this concept of there being this tension and this battle between these two entities, and that before we think or do anything, let's say someone, just to give you an example, someone offends you, someone cuts you off in traffic or whatever it is, there's the animal soul instinctive reaction, what my animal soul wants to say and do. And then I've got hopefully, if I'm working on myself, I have to say, hold on a moment. Let me hear another perspective on this, and allow your godly soul to give its opinion about the right way to react. And then, there's a battle. And the question is, which one wins? Sometimes, hopefully, the godly soul wins. But unfortunately, sometimes, as we all know, we can't help ourselves. And we allow our instincts or our impulses to get the better of us. And we say something that we later say, you know what? I'm not so proud of that. Probably should have handled that a little bit differently. That is the reality in most human beings. That life is there. That battle continues on, and therefore Kabbalah does address and comes back to the question that if we're not so good at that, or if we're not meant to be so good at that, if that's not the way we're created, if this battle is an ongoing battle, then if you're not the saint, if you're not given this gift, what is the purpose of putting the godly soul within the animal soul? If it's just the ongoing battle, they can just be side by side. Let them battle it out. But what is the purpose of putting the godly soul within the animal soul? This is a question that is addressed at length in multiple Kabbalistic works from different angles. And today, just to share one or two thoughts on this concept of why, again, for the average person that cannot achieve a total transformation of their animal soul and make it into a, so to speak, godly soul, make it altruistic. If we can't achieve that, what is the purpose for us in having these souls, one reside within the other? Okay, so Kabbalah says that number one, even though it is true we cannot achieve a total transformation, we can achieve a small transformation. We can achieve some level of change within the animal soul. In other words, like this: will the animal soul continue to be self-oriented? Yes. Will it continue to have its impulses and instincts? Yes. But the godly soul can educate the animal soul to make some changes. It may not be a total transformation. The battle does not end. There is an ongoing battle between the two souls, but we can move the battle line, so to speak. Certain battles we can achieve a total victory on. The battle continues, the battle lines move, but at least we have achieved some level of transformation. I.e., for example, if we want to give an example, we could explain to the animal soul, generally speaking, is more focused on possessions and owning material things and having things than it is, for example, on relationships. In other words, this is what drives a lot of people sometimes to neglect relationships for the sake of amassing more material things. Not that to have material things is a bad thing, but when it comes at the expense, or when we neglect relationships or make it a less of a priority, from a spiritual perspective, this is not a good thing. So the animal soul can be explained. You can explain to an animal soul that if you are looking for happiness, which is what the animal soul wants to be happy, ultimately, where are you going to find greater happiness? If you're given a choice in life to have all the possessions you could ever want, but no friends and no family, or to have much less possessions. I mean, obviously, we'd like to have our needs taken. We'd like to have shelter, food, and have our needs taken care of, but have much less possessions. Maybe you don't have the yacht, but you've got lots of friends and lots of family and lots of people. Then I think the animal soul can be made to understand that ultimately that is really what I want. That is really what's more valuable to me. It just needs to be taught that. It needs to be educated. In fact, I would say that this has been one of the great lessons for many people, maybe not all, during the pandemic, during the last 5-6 months, the value of family and relationships and how much people miss those connections, community, relationships. People who haven't been able to see their grandchildren in person, and people who have not been able to be with their friends. I know for my wife's parents, they've missed 2 of their grandchildren's weddings, though they were on Zoom. But obviously, as a grandparent, not to be at your own grandchild's wedding, it's heartbreaking in a certain sense, and you miss those connections and those relationships, not to be able to be there with them. So I think we've learned, hopefully many of us, how important, how significant our relationships are. Without those relationships, what's the value of all those things that we have? You know, it reminds me, there's just a side note, it reminds me of the story of the rabbi who decides he's going to skip. He's had the secret fantasy that he wants to not observe the Yom Kippur one year and go play golf instead. It's just a fantasy the rabbi has. And so one year he decides that's it. He's going to call in sick to the synagogue. They'll have to get a substitute rabbi, or the assistant rabbi will take over the Yom Kippur service. And secretly, he goes out to the golf course on Yom Kippur. And would you know it, that his first swing, it's a hole-in-one. I mean, and it's unbelievable. And he just can't believe it. And the angels say to God, we don't understand. How could you do that? How could you help him in this way? He's sinned. He skipped out on the Yom Kippur. He left behind his congregation, and you got a hole-in-one. And God says, no. Who's he going to tell? And the point is, if you have no one to tell, then what's the point of the hole-in-one, right? What's the point of it? So the point of being that what we cherish in the end is our friends, our relationships, our connections, the people that we have around us. So we can explain the animal soul. It can be educated. We can teach it about what is real happiness? What will ultimately give us satisfaction in life? What are the things that will make us feel good? You can show the animal soul, charity, doing good deeds, volunteering, helping others. It's sweet. It really is sweet. It's enjoyable. It's fulfilling. And we can help the animal soul learn these things. So yes, total transformation we cannot achieve. Are we going to be that saint that's never going to have any self-oriented instincts and impulses? Probably not. But we can move the battle lines a little bit. We can refine ourselves. We can refine the animal soul on some level. And in order to do so, it's that structure that's where the animal soul, godly soul, resides within the animal soul, that gives it that ability to have that interaction with it. They're not living in two foreign lands, but they're closely connected. So the godly soul can talk to the animal soul. It's a therapy session. It can give the animal soul therapy and help it understand certain things and certain realities that can create a small transformation. That is one answer. And we're going to go on to another one in a moment, just to unmute to see if anyone has any comments or questions at this time. Actually, better questions for now, comments at the end, if you have a question, and then we'll go on. Okay.
Rabbi, how do you spell the word Garby?
Godly?
Refer to this. Just how do you spell it? Because I don't.
It's not really a word that's not really a word you'd find a lot in English, but I would say Godly, godly soul. But it's not really a word
godly. Okay, godly. I'm sorry, I never got the.
It's my accent.
Yes. Thank you.
So
my accent.
yeah. So there's no right or wrong accent. So that is the concept. Okay, let's mute and go on. Okay. So this is one answer, that we do have the ability to create we can have small victories, small transformations, and this is why the godly soul has to reside within the animal soul. But there is another concept here. And Kabbalah says that the other concept, the other idea that we're dealing with here, is that we have to take a step back and understand what our goal is. Our goal has really two parts to it. It's really a two-pronged goal. One is our personal growth. God put us here to grow, to learn, to grow, to develop. We should leave this world hopefully better than when we came to this world, that we've worked on ourselves, we refined ourselves. We've gone through a journey, a transformation of sorts. We may not become the saint, we may not become perfect, but we've matured, we've grown. We've learned from life, and we've worked on ourselves to become better. That is one goal. But there is another piece. There is another goal, that God put us here for another purpose. And that is not necessarily only for our own spiritual benefit and growth, but because there is a mission, a purpose in bringing God's presence into this world, bringing the divine into this world, transforming our world into a home for God. That is, whether or not you become a better person in doing so is not really necessarily connected. They're two different things. You should become a better person. That's one goal. Not connected and exclusive. And irrespective of that, there is another goal, which is that you have a mission to bring godliness into the world, to connect God with this world. We do that by doing God's deeds in this world. When we do good deeds, which is what God wants us to do in this world, we bring God's presence into this world. And we connect our world with God's presence. That's one of the reasons why Judaism talks about, and we'll talk more about another angle of this soon, about actions. When you take a physical thing and you do a mitzvah with it, you do a good deed with it, you do something good with it, that physical object now has become connected to God. That physical object now, in many ways, says something else than it was saying before. The statement this physical object was making before was, I'm a physical object, I'm here. Now it says, I'm here as part of a mission. There's an ultimate purpose to all of creation. There's an ultimate reason for everything. Life has purpose. The world has meaning. And this physical object now testifies to that by the very fact that it's been used for something godly. So there is this second, so to speak, goal, different goal. That's a different track. It's a different goal. Not one is more important than the other, or one is it's one or the other. These are two tracks that we're constantly working on, and two tracks that we're constantly thinking about: our personal growth, and then our role in this mission, in God's mission, in bringing godliness into this world, bringing the divine into this world. So the Kabbalah says that when the godly soul resides within the animal soul, what happens is that structure means that when the godly soul wants to do a good deed, let's say the godly soul says, I want to do a good deed. I want to take the control of the driver's seat and drive this car to do this and this action. The action could be an action of charity. I'm going to give charity. So the godly soul makes that decision that it's going to. Just one moment, sorry. One of the kids want to paint and I have the paper. Okay. So again, this other goal, there are two separate goals, two separate tracks, and when the godly soul wants to do a good deed, so what happens is, because of the structure that we have, the godly soul needs the animal soul to partner in doing the good deed. Because the way this thing is structured is because the godly soul is within the animal soul, and the animal soul is really the part of the person that animates the body. In other words, the godly soul doesn't directly animate the body. It needs the animal soul to do the animation. That's what it does. So it turns out that when the godly soul does a good deed, it is doing it via the animal soul. The animal soul becomes maybe possibly an unwilling participant in the process, because the godly soul is too sublime and too abstract to actually in any way animate and directly interact with the body. It's too sublime, too abstract. So what it does is it decides it wants to do the right thing, and then it engages the animal soul into doing it. So in fact, the godly soul never really directly sits in the driver's seat. What it does is it puts the animal soul in the driver's seat and puts almost a gun to its head. I'm just using that as an example, and says, this is where we're driving. I need you to drive there. So the animal soul has to get involved in the good deed unwillingly, not that it wants to. It doesn't say, oh, I'm not talking about where we transform and educate the animal soul to do something. That's transformation. You educate the animal soul, and now it wants to do the right thing. What I'm talking about is that this godly soul's made a decision. This is what we're going to do. The godly soul's is going to have its way, so to speak, that we're going to do a good deed, and the animal soul is forced to go along with it, and it has to animate the body to go and do the good deed, to do the action. In other words, a physical action cannot be undertaken by the godly soul without the participation of the animal soul. So the godly soul uses it within the animal soul, and it uses it in order to achieve what it wants to achieve. It has to become a partner in this process, and thereby, by doing so, the animal soul now becomes connected to God. It was a participant in the good deed. It was used and part of the good deed. It now also becomes connected to the divine. So in the process, true, it hasn't been transformed, but in the process and in the goal of bringing the divine into this world, we've achieved now a connection between the body, the animal soul, and the divine, because the animal soul had to be a partner in this process of doing the good deed. So this, says the Kabbalah, and I'm going to flesh this out a little bit more so we'll get a better understanding of it. Says the Kabbalah, this is one of the reasons why the animal's godly soul resides within the animal soul within the body, because what has to happen is every time the godly soul wants to drive the car, it has to do it via the animal soul. The animal soul's got to be a partner in this process. But there is a caveat here. So if it has to engage the animal soul in this process. What's the caveat? The caveat is that that's only when the godly soul is involved in an action, in a deed. In other words, like this: when the animal soul's involved in thinking and feeling good things, having good thoughts and good feelings, it doesn't need the animal soul. It can do that within itself. The godly soul within itself can think and feel spiritual things, can have good thoughts, good feelings. But when it wants to do something, when it wants to do an action, then it has no choice but to engage the animal soul. And the animal soul has to become an unwilling partner in this process, but by doing so does become connected to the divine. So first of all, that's interesting, because obviously it's important to have good thoughts. It's important to have good feelings. We want to have the right thoughts. We want to have the right feelings. We want to feel and think the right things. But this is another reason, one of many, why actions, even if they're uninspired, it makes no difference, where actions play a very important role, because with their good deeds, what they're doing is, because they're an action that requires the physical body to move, you need the body to be animated, it requires that the animal soul has to be involved. And because the animal soul has to be involved, it becomes connected to the divine. Now, you may ask, what's the purpose, or what value is there in connecting this unwilling partner? It's not willing. It's not a willing participant in this process. It's just kind of being pulled along. So to understand this, we have to ask ourselves, in a certain sense, when you have a deed that you do because you're excited and you are intellectually, emotionally engaged. So sometimes you understand something, you have a strong feeling about it, and you go and do it. Versus, I don't really have a strong understanding of it. I don't really have strong feelings for it, but I'm doing it because I know it's the right thing to do. I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do. I don't necessarily intellectually appreciate it. I don't emotionally feel anything for it, but I'm gonna do it. So the question is, which one is better? So it really depends. If the goal is your own personal transformation, obviously we'd like you to think, be aware, understand, and to feel. But if the goal is relationship, so to speak, connecting to the divine, connecting to something, in some ways doing something when you're not intellectually and emotionally engaged, in some ways is a deeper connection. Because when you do something, when your thoughts and feelings are involved, you're doing it because I want to do it. There is an I that's involved. I want to do this. When you say, I don't want to do this, but I'm just doing it because I know it's the right thing. And I'm doing it because it needs to get done. In a certain way, we've now moved the I out, and the focus is on your will, not what I want. You have a will, I'm gonna do it, but not because I want to do it. So in some ways, when we do things when we don't want to do it, and we do it anyways, in a certain sense, there's a deeper connection. There's a deeper expression of relationship than when I want to do it. As we've said many times before, for example, you can have just to use an example, you can have an evening where you go out with your spouse and have a romantic evening and go out for dinner, and you're having this wonderful, deep, connecting conversation, and that's beautiful, and you're intellectually and emotionally in the moment, connecting with the other person. Or you can have your spouse call you in the middle of some hectic craziness in your life, and you're high stressed, and there's a lot going on, and everything's vying for your attention, and you take just a moment just to say, hi, honey, or hi, how's it going? And it's not a very deep, and your mind and your heart is like, oh gosh, I've got so much else going on right now, but you take the time just to connect for a moment. You may not be intellectually and emotionally as engaged, but in a certain sense, the statement that you're making is a greater statement. It's saying, even though I'm not so excited, even though I'm not so in the moment, but this relationship is important to me. This is a very important commitment in my life. So sometimes doing something when you don't necessarily want to do it, but you do it anyways because you know it's the right thing to do, many times that's actually a deeper relationship, a deeper connection than when you're intellectually and emotionally engaged and excited. So getting the animal soul and to do it, because the animal soul's been told and it understands it's the right thing to do, even though it's not inspired, it's not intellectually and emotionally engaged, but it knows this is right, this is what needs to be done, is a connection, and in many ways is a very deep connection. So again, what Kabbalah says is that when we put the godly soul within the animal soul, so it has to kind of move the animal soul and tell the animal soul, listen, we got to do this, it's the right thing. And when we talk about your animal soul, it's your awareness. You become aware of, okay, this is the right thing, this needs to be done, and you go ahead and do it. That awareness, this is the right thing, this needs to be done. I'm not sure I understand it fully, I'm not sure I feel tremendously excited about it or feel emotionally engaged by it, but I know it's the right thing. It needs to be done. When the animal soul is involved in that, it is connecting to the divine. It's connecting to God. It may not necessarily achieve the goal of your personal growth and transformation, but it does achieve the goal of connecting the divine to us, bringing God's presence into this world. And so really, ultimately, when we step back, we find that this structure of animal soul within godly soul within the animal soul really speaks to both of these goals. The goal of transformation, there is some level of transformation that takes place, not complete, but there is some level of transformation that takes place where the godly soul educates, refines, enlightens the animal soul. It can teach it. Charity is good. Relationships are important. Study is important. Meditation is good for you. Whatever it may be, you can engage the animal soul on some level, transform it. Not totally. It's still going to be an animal soul. It reminds me of the story of Maimonides. You know that he had a famous story where he had this debate with the doctors of Egypt, where they said just like you can train a human being to do anything, you can train an animal to do anything as well. And he said you could train animals, but there are limitations in the sense you can't make an animal to be not an animal. If it's an animal, it's an animal. And they actually showed in front of the king, they made a party where they took cats, and they had these cats, as I've shared the story before, they trained them to walk on their hind legs, hold plates, and act as waiters. And they showed Maimonides, look, you can train them to behave like human beings. Maimonides just kept quiet. In the middle of the meal, he took out some mice, threw them on the floor, and would you know it, of course, the cats, in a moment, threw up the plates in the air, back on all four, chasing the mice. And he said, their instincts and their impulses are not going to change. Our animal souls also, we can transform them on some level, but they're still animal souls. There'll be a moment to test where that animal and that sense of instinct and impulse will come out. Where the mice are on the floor, it'll come right back. It'll be back what it is, unless, again, you're the saint. But there is, again, some level of transformation. And on the other hand, when we're talking about the goal of bringing the divine, connecting our world with the divine, deeds where the animal soul has to be involved and has to be a partner in the process, because that's what animates the body to do the deed. By it being a partner in this process, even if it's not emotionally and intellectually excited about it, that is a connection. It is a relationship, and in some ways a very valuable relationship. We say it's just got to be done because it's the right thing to do. And that is, again, the second reason the Kabbalah gives for that process of one soul within the other soul. And also, of course, shows us that even when we're not seemingly growing, a good deed has value even when we're not growing from it. Even if it's not transforming us, a good deed brings God's presence into this world. And not only God's presence in the world, brings God's presence into us, into our animal soul. We are achieving that goal of God, even if we're not being transformed in the process. I'm going to take questions, and then we'll go over our sheet. Any questions? Yes.
So I understand the partnership between the animal soul and the godly soul, and how we refine and train and teach. But my question is that for many years we've talked about that the godly soul is indeed our default setting. That we've often gone through and studied, who am I really? So when I picture the godly soul within the animal soul, I find that a little confusing.
I would say on the contrary, I think it's consistent with that idea. In other words, if you're saying one is within the other, so if I dig deep and I remove layers, what am I going to find?
I see. Okay.
You understand? So yes, our natural impulses and instincts may be more the animal soul, because that's what we're more conscious of and more naturally connected with. But if I dig deeper, which might require digging, what am I going to find inside of that? My godly soul is going to be inside of that, which means that it lies at the core, which, and again, reflected in the fact that deep down, what do people want? They want godliness. They want transcendence. They want connection. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for, even our animal souls drives are really driven by our godly soul's inner wants and desires. Because in other words, the godly soul's desire for transcendence is also felt by the animal soul, but what it senses is this want and desire. It doesn't understand what the want and desire is. But it translates it is into a want and desire for material, for pleasure. What's really driving it and what's in it, like, the core behind it is really this want for transcendence. There was a great article, editorial in the New York Times many years ago, but the title was, it was a great article, but the title really very much expressed this idea. And it says, how human beings are seeking God and settling for sex. And the idea being that what we really want is a deep connection to another human being, to be deeply, deeply connected and on a soul level. That's what we really want. What our body feels and our body senses, oh, I just want the pleasure. I just want the connection. So that's a lot of what happens, is that because the godly soul is in the core, it is the ultimate driving force. It just gets misunderstood and mistranslated in the animal soul's processing. And what it does is says, oh, want, desire. Yeah, I want physical. I want. But so it is. It does lie at the core. And I think this is consistent with that.
Thank you.
Rabbi, would you
Yes.
say that the struggle for me personally,
Yeah.
when I feel guilty about something, would that be a good word for that struggle, the animal soul versus
Okay.
the
So it
spiritual
depends
soul?
when we say guilt, it depends what we mean by that. If guilt is walking around saying I'm no good and I'm a bad person and I'm a failure, that's not a good thing, and there's no purpose in that. And in fact, there's no growth that comes out of that. Really, ultimately, what we want to achieve is a sense of remorse that we could have done better, and therefore we're inspired to change. That sense of remorse, if I could have done better, and next time I want to do better, that comes from the godly soul. It's part of this, the godly soul's expression. It expresses itself in that way. In fact, what people have to understand is that repentance, if you want to use that word, or teshuva, is 99% learning to understand how amazing you are as a person. Only from that context can you then say, oh, well, if that's the case, I could have done a better job. If you think you're a bad person, if you think you're not good, then, well, if I'm not good, then I guess I can't do good things. So the whole concept of remorse only can begin with first understanding and believing in yourself. Wow. If you understand and believe in yourself, and you know how much God believes in you, and then you say, well, if that's the case, and I'm underachieving, I could have done so much more, then we can talk about remorse and change. So 99% of repentance, or whatever you want to call it, is learning to believe in yourself. That's 99% of the work, believing in yourself and reminding yourself how wonderful you are. That's why we're told on Yom Kippur, every person is compared to a high priest. We wear white, because what we want to know is that, what we want to remember is God sees you as a high priest. He believes you're a high priest. That's how he sees you. That's how he understands you. And in that context, well, if I'm a high priest, I definitely can do better. Then we can talk about change. So it's very important to remember that that remorse is, a lot of people, have associated with words like guilt and not good. It's on the contrary. You can only change from the perspective of knowing how amazing you are, or how much potential you have, how much God trusts and believes in you, and how much capacities and talents you have. When you're lifted up to that place, then you can say, well, okay, now I know I could do better, and I'm going to do better. So that's really, I think we have to keep that in mind. This is, it's not a process that pulls a person down. It should be it's a process that should bring us up. And that's the most effective way to create change, because ultimately it's not about feeling guilty. That doesn't get us anywhere. It's about change, and change comes from inspiring people and reminding ourselves how great we are and how much potential we have. Okay. Yes, Jerry. You have to unmute.
Yes. Rabbi, would that also cover the self-conflicted, like you're conflicted within? And how do you settle self-confliction?
Okay. So the answer, yes, the reason why we are conflicted beings, why we're complicated beings, is because life is the tale of two souls. That is the reason, that explains the human condition and why we are conflicted and why we go backwards and forth. And some days we feel this way and that way, and we deal with all this inner tension because of these two souls. How we resolve it is by giving the godly soul the control of or more control of the car. Now you could say, why can't, because now you could say, what about the other way around? What if we give the animal soul complete control, and then we've ended the conflict that way? Let if there's two souls, let one of them win, and whichever one it is, and it's done, it's over, the conflict is over. So the answer to that is that an animal soul can never ever be at peace. A godly soul can never ever be at peace and can never really be satisfied with a hedonistic, empty, narcissistic existence. It can't. It can never find satisfaction in that. It just never will. A godly soul is never going to be at peace with that. But the contrary, an animal soul, because at its very core, it itself is a creation of God. It itself is godly. It's just confused. So if you educate it and you do a good deed, the animal soul says, you know what? This is good. I like it. So the animal soul can come to a realization. It's like an animal soul is like a spoiled, difficult child, right? An immature, difficult child. If you can teach the child, and the child can come to a realization about certain things. And that's how you ultimately achieve peace between these two souls. It can't be achieved by going along with the animal soul. It'll never bring person peace. And you see in life, when people lead hedonistic, narcissistic, empty lives, they're not at peace. They can't be at peace. On the other hand, when a person leads when they allow the godly soul, the animal soul does find happiness there. The animal soul can find peace because in its own very core, which is not what we discussed today, it is also godly. It also has it's just a confused being. It's a confused entity that just needs help understanding it. It skews the reality, as we mentioned before. It skews its view is skewed. It just needs to be able to see things differently. Okay, I'm going to share the screen here to see if we can go over our lesson today. Okay, there it's up on your screen. The world of action. Inspiration is difficult to induce, and once achieved, it can be fleeting. Many of our deeds are uninspired. Kabbalah provides a spiritual MRI. It exposes the two-soul nature of the human condition, two souls and one driver's seat. Let's just think about it that way. The altruistic, truth-seeking soul resides within the animal soul. What is the purpose of this spiritual structure if most of us cannot transform the animal soul? And so we explained the purpose of our existence is not only our personal growth, it is also connecting our world with the divine. When the altruistic soul wants to do a good deed, it must engage the animal soul to engage the body. It's the conduit through which it is able to reach the body. In this way, the animal soul becomes connected to the divine. It becomes a partner in the deed, just doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's got to do it. When a deed is without the intellectual and emotional appreciation, it is less transformative, but it is a deeper connection. So it's less transformative. That's the important point here. It is less transformative, but in a certain sense, it's a deeper connection because it's not I want to do it. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. Even the I is put aside. Even though I don't want to do it, I'm doing it anyway. And the I being put aside makes it a deeper connection. Again, when you do things in a marriage, sorry.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Just one moment.
Okay, sure.
When a person, again, use the example within the context of a marriage, of a relationship, when a person does something that is they want to do in a relationship, that's a wonderful thing. And in many ways, they're feeling and expressing deep love. But when you don't want to do something and you do it for your loved one anyways, it's a much deeper expression of commitment. My commitment is such that even though I don't want to do it, it's not something I like doing it. In other words, in many ways, it is a much deeper expression. You know, when you take out the garbage, it's not always, you're not whistling and saying, this is the funnest thing I ever do. I don't find anything more romantic and exciting in life. But if it makes your spouse happy that you took the garbage out, you do that, doing it even though you don't want to. And in many ways, it's putting the I aside and doing what the other person wants. And so that's where the animal soul can connect by saying, I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. The godly soul has shown it that it's the right thing, and it will do it anyways. Sorry, I'll unmute and I'll take the questions.
I have a question. Earlier, you said that God sees you as a high priest, and so instead of just remorseing, know that you can change. And then you mentioned the name of a day where you wear white.
Yeah, so Yom Kippur, which is the Yom Kippur,
okay.
the Day of Atonement. Customarily, a lot of people wear white. One of the reasons given is we're supposed to feel like we are like the high priest, or we are like angelic beings, white angelic beings, just a symbol. But the idea is that's how the whole process starts. It's not I'm bad, I'm no good, I've made lots of mistakes, I'm a bad person. That's the wrong path. That won't go anywhere. All that does is make you depressed and say I'm bad and I want to give up. That's not the way to do this. Right. The way to do repentance is I am an amazing human being. God has given me great gifts. I have great capacity. God believes in me. God thinks of me as an angel, as a high priest. From that context, if that's the case, wow, I could have done so much more this past year. I have so much more I can give. I am underachieving. I'm not achieving what I could achieve. So the whole process, 99% of it is learning to love yourself, learning to believe in yourself, learning to trust yourself, learning to appreciate God's trust and faith in you, how much he believes in you. From that, when we get that, then we can grow. Then we can look back at our lives and say, you know what? I can do a whole lot better. This is not, I'm underselling myself. I'm underachieving. I could do so much better. But it's all comes from that place of being uplifted, feeling great, feeling wonderful. That's at least the Hasidic approach to Yom Kippur and growth and change, much more effective than just reminding a person 1,000 times how not good they are.
Okay. So you said that this is Hasidic. This teaching is Hasidic.
This is the Hasidic approach to how repentance should be done. It's more positive and joy. That's why it's joyous. It's It's a day of joy. It's a day of feeling wonderful and feeling great. And only from that perspective do people effectively change in a good way.
Okay.
Just telling people that if you don't change, you're going to go to hell or you're going to get punished. It can work on some level, but it has limitations. It's not exactly going to be the greatest way to transform someone.
Well, in the Bible, it does say it is by grace that we are led to repentance, and for that matter, because I want to be a better person, it's like you want to seek God's grace to lead you into repentance.
You got to believe.
It's to become a better person.
Right. You got to believe.
It's not a thing of remorse.
Correct. You got to believe.
And I have another question.
Yeah, you got to first. You got to believe. Just one moment. First, you got to believe in your abilities and God's what the abilities that God has given you, and then you can come to that place. Yeah. One final question, and then I want to let everyone go. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you give me a reference to like a reading in the Hasidic or another source where I can learn more about this Yom Kippur and repentance and the Hasidic approach to it? Like, I want to learn more about this. Can you give me a reference?
I would say look for a book called The Inside Story. Just Google that afterwards and see if that will help you. Okay, everyone have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank